Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. And today our guest is Jeff Patterson. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on. I'm curious, what drew you to meditation? Was it martial arts that came first or meditation came first? Which one was it? Combination?
Yeah, I was drawn to the meditative arts in a bit of a roundabout way. As a young guy, I was very much into Western boxing, and I used to go to a boxing gym not too far down the street here from my academy in Portland. And at a boxing gym, if you're not familiar with how they're usually run, it's not like your traditional fitness class where you go in and there's an instructor leading a group of students. Usually there's a handful of coaches, and each one of those coaches might have a few fighters that they're working with. Well, at this one particular gym, one of the coaches that was there was a very well-known coach in the boxing community. He created champions in both amateur and the professional arena. And I really wanted to get to spend some time working with him, but his card was full and he wasn't looking for any people to train. Well, because of that, I'd always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there. I'd work hard and try to get him to notice me and followed him around basically for about 3 or 4 months. And after about 4 months, he finally started giving me some tips and showing me a few things. And it was only about maybe 2 or 3 weeks of getting to work with him when he said something to me that changed my life forever. In that he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi.
Hmm.
Time I was this young kid thinking, isn't Tai Chi for old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter? But I followed his guidance, and not only has it changed my life in many ways through the years, I've had over 26,000 people come through my academy here in Portland, and I've heard hundreds of stories of how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives. And that's what's made me so passionate about trying to get the message out there and write my last couple books and create my online programs and all of that.
Let's go rewind back and talk about your origin story. Where did you grow up?
You know the moment when you realize that your high hit you way harder than you expected. Your heart's racing, your head's spinning, and you wish that you could hit an emergency stop button. Guess what? There's an emergency stop button that's available now, or at least a pause. It's called Antidose. Antidose is a fast-acting THC-free formula and designed to minimize the unwanted effects of high-potency THC, so you can get back to being yourself and fast. Whether you're stuck on a couch or spinning in your head, Antidose helps you to reset, restore, and rebalance. Find out more at antidose.com.
I grew up mostly in Southern Oregon, a little small town called Eagle Point, down by Medford and Ashland, if you're familiar with the Oregon area.
I mean, slightly, just Portland, Bend, that
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
uh, area. But so growing up, were your parents together? Do you have siblings?
I have one sister. I was raised in a single parent family with fairly modest means. We grew up in HUD housing and on food stamps and didn't have a lot of disposable income. So even though I was interested in martial arts as a kid, I was never able to start up until I got my first job and was able to pay for it myself.
Uh, I mean, you said you were interested in martial arts as a kid, but like, were you into sports? Were you, I don't know, into art? Were you into math? Like, what kind of kid was Jeff?
I love baseball. I played baseball through high school. You couldn't get me away from the water. I was fishing all the time on the rivers and looking for salmon, looking for largemouth bass. It was just kind of something I was really passionate about. And I also loved BMX as a kid. And then that grew into motocross and riding motorcycles. So that's kind of how I grew up.
So did somebody sort of, teach you fishing? Did you have mentors? Were you with like friends or family? How'd you get into that?
Yeah, I had a couple friends who their dads always used to take us out, and so one of them taught me salmon fishing, the other one taught me how to largemouth bass fish, I was in the summertime, I was probably on the water somewhere fishing 5, 6 days a week if I wasn't on my bike.
Got it. So martial arts, were you like a Bruce Lee fan? Is that how you started like getting into martial arts or like visually seeing it, or was there some other exposure?
Yeah, it was mostly through TV that I was introduced to martial arts through watching Bruce Lee and watching that old show Kung Fu. I don't know if you remember that, David
Yeah.
Carradine.
Oh yeah. I'm
Uh,
in I'm in my 50s, man. So here's a quick one for you. So first of all, I had a Bruce Lee poster, the velvet one, and then I had the one in the orange jumpsuit. And when I think I was like maybe 16, 17, I think 16. I got a job with this company called Asian World of Martial Arts in
oh
Philly.
yeah, I
So
know it.
Asian World of Martial Arts, this is before online shopping. Right? We had catalogs and all that stuff. So I got free anything I wanted. So I would sit there because I was doing inventory and stuff, and I got a book on Dimok, like the Death Touch, and I was so infatuated by all that stuff that I remember knocking myself out with my nunchucks because you go between the legs, you don't think about it. Long chain pops you in the back, and you're out. So learn my lessons fairly quick with that. So I can relate to that whole thing. And also, it was a big push because, I got into martial arts. All my friends were there until I discovered girls, and then I was no longer interested in getting beat up by the sensei there. But so I didn't follow through, past my teens. So was that sort of your trajectory too, like watching it on TV, getting connected to those shows, and then that was sort of the era of everybody was going into martial arts as kids.
Yeah, that got me sparked and kind of ignited the fuse, if you will, but it wasn't until my early teens when I was able to even get started because that's when I got my first job. And so once I started training, shortly after, I joined the Marine Corps at 17 and went into the Marine Corps and kept training through the Marines. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I moved up here to Portland, Oregon to go to college and continued training up here. And at the school that I was at during college, I was also teaching part-time there to help pay my way through school. And I remember at that time meeting my boxing coach that I was referring to earlier, and him telling me my last couple of years of college that you want to create a life and not make a living. And here, this whole time, I'm going to college thinking I'm going to get a big, important job doing something in finance. I was the first kid in my whole extended family to go through college. And I decided to be a martial arts and meditation instructor. And, for the first 6 or 7 years of growing this business, it was like I was still living in HUD housing as a kid. It was very difficult to get it rolling. And I never would have dreamed that it would have turned into what it has. We have 15 employees now. I've got 500 active members. It's a pretty big community, and I'm just glad that I stuck with it and followed my passion.
Was there anything in your life? I mean, martial arts, people now as adults, and we understand that that's a practice more or less for defense or, it's a meditative practice. But uh, a lot of kids, like I went into it because there was anger issues and there was kids that were bullying and I wanted to defend myself. So there was a lot of that was going on in my mind. When you were, and I know you said you got into it later and then also boxing, but was there certain aspects of your life, maybe, and I don't want to play like armchair psychologist or anything like that, but having a single parent household, I went through a bunch of different abuse myself. Was there anything that was internally inside of you that said, you know what, this is a way I need to kind of get this out of myself, and fighting is a way to be a vehicle to do that?
Definitely. Boxing was very challenging for me because I was in the beginning, I was in my head. I was always second guessing everything. And when you do that in boxing, it's a fast-paced game. And the minute you get in your head, you're already getting hit. And so it took me a while to figure out how to stay present and how to let go and how to get more in tune with that. And when I did, it changed my whole life, because your whole way that you hold yourself and everything you do is how you deal with yourself mentally. And if you're doing that in the ring, you're also doing it out on the streets. And so when I made that realization, that was a pretty big turning point in my life, and it really helped me in a lot of ways.
So when you met this boxing coach that told you that meditation is a path, did he give you any insight on what type of meditation, or here's where you go, here's what you do, or is like meditation, go fend for yourself and
Yeah.
find TM or go on your YouTube? I don't think there was YouTube back then anyway, and get a guided meditation or anything like that.
No, yeah. So he got me started with my practice. He showed me a few movements of a Tai Chi form, and then he
Hmm.
showed me a sitting meditation with some breath work. And I did that every day religiously. And that's how I got started.
So explain to me like the yielding warrior method, how it differs from traditional meditation. What is so your path
Well, the
process?
yielding warrior method, we take the meditative arts. And when I talk about meditative arts, I'm talking about movement practices like Tai Chi and Qigong and standing meditation from each one, sitting meditation and breathwork strategies, and all of these things, and kind of understand the science behind why we do these different practices. So you learn how to build an evolving life practice with the meditative arts, because anytime somebody comes to a meditation practice, there's kind of five different paths that I usually see people follow. And the first one is an athletic or performance side of the path. And, a lot of professional athletes these days are turning to the meditative arts to help improve their performance, their timing, their mind body connection, their ability to stay present, all of these things that will help that high performance. Then there's the therapeutic side of the practice, which is good for longevity and dealing with injuries and just being more healthy in the body. There's the medical side of the practice, and all of Chinese medicine is based off of Qigong theory, which is a very big meditative practice that a lot of people follow. And then there's the philosophical side of the practice, which is something that I've always personally been drawn to. And then lastly, there's the spiritual side of the practice. And when you start understanding these different ways that you can take your meditation practice, you can integrate different things that kind of help you focus down that path.
So is that how you sort of, I think I read that you refer to it as active meditation, and they're like I've ADD, and meditation was difficult for me, and I found I took a transcendental meditation course, and that sort of connected with me, but still, it's not the easiest thing to do. Active like movement. So like a meditative state for me, besides like the traditional sit down and breath and all that stuff, is out hiking. So if I'm out in nature, I go on a long hike and I'm disconnected. I'm present, but I'm disconnected. I'm still what I feel is a meditative state. So is that how active meditation manifests itself, or is it more specific, purposeful with that breath work that you mentioned as well?
Yeah, so when you're building an evolving life practice, there's different modalities that we use. We have ritual practices, active practices, which would include mindfulness style training, like what you're talking about,
Uh-huh.
walking through the woods. And then there's philosophical practices. Ritual practices are when you actually set time aside to really turn your focus inward. And this could be in a Qigong set or a Tai Chi form or a sitting meditation or standing meditation. So it could involve movement, but it couldn't involve movement out on the mountainside or on a trail or in the city, because you're consciously having to think about where you're placing your foot and what are these outside distractions that are influencing us. Then there's active practices, which could involve walking through the woods. But also active practices are things that help bring us back into the present moment. And they could be things that are as simple as 60 seconds of deep breathing, or maybe doing some spinal rotation, something to just kind of bring our awareness back into the body. Because even if you're a disciplined person and you're doing a ritual practice every day for, say, 20 or 30 minutes, and it helps you feel at peace and you're enjoying that practice, it makes no sense if the rest of the day you're stressed out and distracted. So these active practices help us integrate that mindset and that being, if you will, in everything we do. And then we start really living the lifestyle. And then the third pillar of a meditation practice is the philosophical side of the training. And that helps open up our mind to see things from a different perspective, kind of widening your peripheral vision, if you will, so you can see things from different angles. And this can be used in active practices as well as ritual practices.
So I know we want people to come to your academy and get their training, but if a listener wants to start with something so they can start feeling that there's a process, would you suggest a combination of movements and that mindfulness, or what should they do if they want to start practicing?
Yeah. So, one of the hardest things for me as a teacher for over 30 years is getting people to see the value in a meditation practice and really making it part of their life. And to answer your question in a bit of a roundabout way, I'm going to give you three things that I always like people to consider when they come to a meditation practice. And I find that if they put a little bit of heartfelt thought into these three things, that they're going to be more successful and they're going to get a lot of the benefits that the practice has to offer. And the first one is, why are you being drawn to the practice? What do you want to accomplish by integrating meditation into your life? And once you have that idea, think about 10 or 20 things in your life that are going to be positively influenced by accomplishing this goal. And then flip the coin and think about, if you don't do this and you don't accomplish this goal, what are 10 or 20 things that are going to negatively influence you? Because, we're all human, and doing something every day is kind of daunting for somebody to think about. And so having this fuel and this idea and this motivation to kind of help drive us and be consistent so we reap the benefits of the practice is really key. And that leads into the second thing that you really want to have a good understanding of, which is consistency. And there's this ancient Chinese story that I really like that illustrates this well. And it's about this old stonecutter who was very well known all across the lands for creating these beautiful sculptures of animals and landscapes. And every morning, this stonecutter used to go down to the river and meditate. Well, one day he was walking along the river after his meditation, and he had this very profound vision of this big 6 foot tall mystical Chinese dragon. And he was so taken by this vision that he decided that this was going to be his next project. And you can imagine finding a piece of jade this size is not an easy feat. So it took him 3 or 4 months to travel around and look for this perfect rock to create this sculpture. Once he found it, he brought it back to his shop, and all of his apprentices that came to study with him from all over were excited to see how this project was going to come out. And so they would always stop by and kind of watch him work. Well, before he actually started work on the project, he studied the stone for a few days. He walked around and tried to envision how this dragon was going to appear through the stone. And once he decided to start working, he carefully placed his chisel in one part of the stone and began tapping at the same place over and over again, hundreds, if not thousands of times a day. A few days went by and nothing changed. A few more days went by and thousands more taps, and his apprentices started kind of second guessing, wondering if he was doing the right thing or if he should try something different. A few more days went by and thousands of more taps. And then finally, this big section of the stone broke off the rock. And one of his apprentices said, "How did you know that that tap was going to break the stone?" And he said, "It wasn't that tap that broke the stone. It was the thousands before it." And the apprentice got a little bit discouraged and he said, "But I've been watching you and there wasn't even a scratch or a crack in the rock. Why didn't you try something different? How did you know to keep going?" And so the stonecutter got down on one of his knees and he felt the smooth crack on the stone. And he says, "Oftentimes, it's not what you see, and each strike was not wasted. The work that I was doing was happening beneath the surface. And not only was a stone changing beneath the surface, but oftentimes the one who wields the hammer is seeing these benefits as well." And I like this story because it so closely translates into the meditative arts, and that, we're practicing this breath work and these movement practices and studying these philosophical concepts that are strengthening the foundation beneath the surface. And we got to have the belief and the understanding that it's going to change and it's going to bear more fruits down the road. And so, this idea of consistency is really important to understand when you come to the practice. And then the third and final thing to understand is you need to find a guide. There's so many videos out there on meditation. You could look for a million different videos on YouTube and you'll find this and that and the other. And if you think you're going to be self-taught, you're going to get so distracted and be off on so many different directions that you could waste years of time trying to put this stuff together. You know, our lives are short and your time is valuable. Finding somebody to help point you down the right path is essential. I've been studying the meditative arts now for 36 years, and I'm still just a student learning all the time. And so it's important to have somebody in your corner. Now, if you have a good solid why and you've put some heartfelt thought into this and you understand the importance of consistency and you have somebody helping point you down the right path, that's going to help you be more successful than anything else I could tell you.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I think you mentioned this whole notion of meditating. Like, let's say you're meditating in the morning, you have your routine, but you're stressed throughout the day, or doing it, uh, you know, at night. So, how do you mitigate that? Is it like movement during the day when you're starting to feel that stress, or like what are some of the indicators, best practices to do that? Because me, like, transparent, one of the reasons I turn to meditation is because of the stress that I have during the day, running businesses and all that other stuff. So at the end of the day, I'm trying to decompress from that. I'm not sure if that's a good enough reason, a strong enough reason, because I'm still experiencing, all that stress during the day. And I found it, interesting that you mentioned that. Maybe that's not the most effective way to meditate.
So there are a lot of things that you can do when you start feeling stress to help calm you down, and that's part of the meditation journey. However, if your meditation practice is geared on you go practice every time you're stressed, you're missing the boat, because you need to have this consistent daily ritual that we're doing every day as part of the heart of your practice. And then we integrate these active practices that can be used to help regulate our physiology, our mental well being, and our emotional well being throughout the day. But it's kind of like, I always tell people to think, if you want an apple for lunch, you're not going to go plant a seed in the morning and expect to have the fruit ready for you in the afternoon. You got to be putting that time in and caring for it and putting water down and letting it get the appropriate amount of sunlight. All of these things are part of building that evolving life practice. And when you do that, you start to have hundreds of tools at your disposal. And not only do these things help regulate your states, but they improve your awareness. So you start to notice these imbalances, because it's very difficult to change something when you're very excited and upset. But as soon as you see yourself start to fall down that path, it's a lot easier to readjust and come back to center. And that's one of the benefits of meditation, is that it helps us make these uh, understandings of how we work inside mentally and physically. One of the most common things I'll hear people say with meditation is that I've tried it before and it just didn't work for me. I couldn't quiet my mind.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, people got this misguided idea that in order to be successful at meditation, you have to reach this state of nirvana where nothing bothers you. And, they couldn't be further from the truth because, you know, again, I've been practicing for a long time. I've traveled around the world many times and trained with some amazing meditation practitioners. And I've never once met anybody who doesn't get distracted. We all do when we practice. And the idea is if you sit for 20 minutes or you do a movement practice like Tai Chi or something like that, and you get distracted 50 times during that session, you recognize the distraction, you use your breath, your posture, and your movement to help bring you back to focus. And now you just got 50 repetitions of being out of balance and coming back to center. And if you do that every day, every month, every year, you start to develop this power and this ability, one, to recognize these imbalances at the first sign of disturbance, and two, have the tools to bring you back to a centered state very easily.
So you mentioned boxing already, and I was wondering, you know, why was boxing so appealing to you as a young person? Was it I understand the martial arts, and we already talked about like the shows and TV, but boxing, was it also like, you saw that on TV, or was there a sort of desire to be able to eh, fight?
Yeah. A little bit of both. I wanted to really be solid in the martial arts if I was going to be following this career path. And I knew that with the hands, there's not much better than boxing. Boxing is amazing. And it was very challenging. And I liked the challenge. It was difficult. That's why I joined the Marine Corps, because thought it was going to be, and at the time it was difficult. And having that as a kind of a foundation in my martial arts has helped with all of the other arts that I'm doing. I practice Muay Thai, I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Eskrima. All of those things kind of revolve around some of the same internal development. And so once you have those foundations, they kind of fit over into other things that you're doing.
So was there ever like, I know you went to the Marine Corps, and you that's a very challenging discipline to be able to go through and come out the other side. When you were trying to figure out what to do, did you ever consider like professional fighting, like MMA type of stuff? Was that any part of your goal, or was it just like, I'm going to use this as my own personal exercise, basically, not a career?
Yeah. When I first started boxing, that was my goal, is to follow the professional fight path. And then when I got introduced to the meditative arts, it kind of opened up new ideas and I started seeing more options, and um it's to follow a career in professional boxing is, one in a million that makes anything that's of value, and it's very rare. And I was really intrigued by the philosophical ideas in the meditative practice, and I started seeing how it was changing so many people's lives and how the benefits of the practice were good for your health, your overall mental well-being, your emotional states, and all of these different things that started to change within me. And I also started seeing them change within other people. And my focus started shifting from wanting to be this fighter into, developing a good, well-rounded idea of both the internal and the external arts.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because there was and I use me an example. There was a lot of anger, and I thought, through my childhood, and I thought that by fighting, I can, project my anger onto my opponent, which is not really the best way to deal with anger because it just perpetuates it. So I was wondering, maybe, and if I would have discovered a meditative practice earlier in my life, I would have been able to let go of that and usually and use it more of a sport, like how the techniques, and instead of using the emotion you said in your head. So I was wondering if there was that trigger that was there before. And when you started meditating, it sort of alleviated that, so you could see things more clearly and treat it as a real art form, and as a sport, instead of going in and using your emotions to lead your matches, etc.
Yeah, there was some of that for sure, because when I started, I was pretty young. And, as I mentioned, when I first started doing boxing, I had a lot of stuff going on in my head, and it took me a while to learn how to let go of that. And finding that peace and finding that clarity were something that boxing played a major role in. Now, the meditative arts, which is, I think, why my boxing coach was pushing me into doing meditation, it really helped me see that focus as well. And when I started recognizing that, I saw that, there's so much more to it than just out there and doing the physical grind, and that's what really kind of inspired me.
And I was wondering about the name yielding, like yielding warrior, because there's something, like, I took this Kabbalah class a while ago, and one of the things they taught was this proactive formula. So before you react, take a beat, pause, and ask yourself a couple of questions, and then respond. And I'm trying to kind of put it as a puzzle piece, because if you are if you're reacting constantly to things, you're, even as a fighter. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a professional fighter, never was, but even as a fighter, you're not responding to the situation clearly, because you're reacting with emotion. So I was wondering, is this yielding warrior? Is the yielding part of that process of, like, pause before you engage, kind of thing, or how did you come up with that yielding?
So first, you mentioning responding versus reacting, that is a big concept for people to understand when they get into martial arts. That's great that, you have that realization, because that is useful in everything we do, in conversations and reactions with other people, and just even our own interpersonal conflicts. When it comes to yielding, in my latest book, The Yielding Warrior, I've broken yielding down into three pillars. There's physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. Now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. Now, it's obvious how this is beneficial in martial arts or any kind of athletics, because it doesn't matter what sport you play, you're going to come up against other bigger, stronger, faster athletes. And if you don't know how to deal with that force and you try to fight it head on all the time, you're going to lose a lot of battles. And so yielding is really key to athletics. Now, in order to be good at physical yielding, you need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. And while this may be a lifetime to really master these skills, from day one, by integrating a meditation practice into your life, you start to see these things with more clarity. And this is where it becomes very interesting, because not only do you start seeing those things inside yourself, but you also start seeing them more clearly in other people. And this is where we move into what I call mental yielding. So, say, for example, you and I are having a conversation, and I say something that unsettles you, and I pick up on it right from that first sign of imbalance. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a harmonious place than if I'm not paying attention to that. And pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to slap me upside the head. And so learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions is extremely powerful. One, we're being more considerate, which is something we could all do more of. And two, it allows us to be strategic in our interactions and lead conversations to a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance, which is good for relationships, for business, sales, negotiations. I mean, there's so many different ways we can apply this idea. And then the third pillar of yielding is the idea of emotional yielding. And this is very much like mental yielding, but with your own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about oftentimes something will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path and we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But by having this awareness from our meditation practice and being more in tune, oftentimes when these things happen, we're able to sit back and not let our emotions get involved and be more settled and make a more educated choice that saves us a lot of heartache on the other side. And I've been explaining this idea of yielding now for many years. I've been running my academy here for 30 years. One of the most common things I hear people say is, yielding makes a lot of sense. In fact, I do yielding all the time. Well, I would agree in that I think everybody does some degree of yielding all the time, but it's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, I guarantee you that person would see things about the series of events and the timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And if you don't practice the meditative arts, there's going to be things about your connection and your awareness internally and in other people that I truly believe you'll never have any clue of without a practice like this in your life.
I mean, you brought up something really interesting about this notion of, reacting to a situation or responding to somebody, and then coming back and thinking, oh shit, you know what? That was not an appropriate response, or I feel I could have handled it differently. So, it, does compassion to yourself, does that come into play in the practice? Because everything is a practice. You're not perfecting, you're going along and practicing that. But if you get off your sort of path in a way, uh, what's the conversation with self that you need to have because you realized that you may have misstepped, misspoken, responded in a different way that you didn't intend to respond? Do you give yourself a hug? Like, how do you, how do you address that? Give yourself some love because I, no, because I'm serious. Because sometimes, sort of serious. Sometimes you're hard on yourself, right? So if you're practicing, you're talking about boxing, you're not perfecting it, you're practicing, you're always trying to get better. Same thing with meditation. So this notion of, giving yourself love and not being overly hard on yourself, I think that inspires people to continue with the journey because they can kind of fall off track if they feel that they're not aligned, not making mistakes, or not, or making mistakes, not the same as other. Oh, this person's better than me. They're further along. They're better in their martial arts. Meditation comes easier to them. I said something incorrectly. Well, how do you treat yourself in that way?
Well, I feel like one of the shortest paths to misery is when you start comparing yourself to other people. You can't control anything somebody else does, and there's always going to be other people that are better at one thing or another than you. But the only thing you can control is what you do every day, how you think every day, and how you respond. Now, if you're consciously trying to improve those things all the time, we're all human. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to go down that path. But when you can live that lifestyle and you're making positive choices on a daily basis to do your rituals, to do your active practices, to be in the right mindset, to maintain a positive attitude, and you slip and slide a little bit, hopefully you're going to have enough positive momentum and things to fall back on. And also by having this heightened awareness, we're not going to follow that path too far down that negativity before we realize that we need to make an adjustment.
Jeff, what inspired you to write The Yielding Warrior?
My biggest inspiration was, through the years and teaching for 30 years, I have literally heard hundreds of stories of how people have been using the meditative arts and seen some amazing life changes. And so I wanted to get this message out there to more people, and that's what inspired me to write it and create my online program. Because while we do have a fairly large academy and we're able to help a lot of people that come in here, there's a lot more people than we can hold in this academy, and so I'm trying to find ways to get this message out there to spread the word a little bit.
Well, I think it's fantastic to be able to, amplify what you're doing Uh, people get there's two things that I hear from people in terms of meditation. You already said the major part of like meditation is available everywhere. You can go to YouTube, there's guided meditation, there's 1,000 different apps. You get on a plane, they have a Calm app. It's everywhere. It's in a common vernacular now. But a lot of people have less than successful meditation practices because you have a guided meditation. Okay, you have a frequency meditation. Okay, but there's inconsistencies. And I love the fact that you're incorporating movement in some of that stuff. If you're a beginner, what do you tell somebody to encourage them so they don't, and obviously you want them to engage with you and your content, in your book and all that stuff. But is there anything we can tell people who are beginners to make meditation sort of less intimidating for them?
Anybody can do this practice. I've taught thousands of people. I've seen people from every walk of life and every physical and mental ability. I've had people that you wouldn't think would be able to do this practice, but because they have the desire and the why to do it, they've found a way to make it work and seen amazing benefits. With any meditation practice, we have these underlying principles that build the foundation and nurture our development with the practice. And so I think it's real important by coming to a meditation practice to have a somewhat of an understanding of this so you can see how it can affect everything we do in life. And I call these foundations the 5 regulations. And they're regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. Regulating the body is the easiest one to understand, and the basic idea of it is maintaining our skeletal alignment and being aware of our muscular tension and relaxation in the body. And an example of this would be, think about a time maybe when you're sitting in front of your computer for 3 or 4 hours and you're feeling lethargic and your neck's getting sore and you're feeling very depleted. And then another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up like you're feeling like you're on top of the world. Well, we're in 100% control of these two different energetic states all day, every day. And this is a basic idea of regulating the body. On a little deeper level, it's maintaining some kind of muscular structure in the body and flexibility, making sure that we're taking in the appropriate nutrients and being healthy in our food intake, and then also getting the appropriate amount of sleep. All of these things are part of that body regulation. Then we have regulating the breath.
Do you mind if I interrupt and ask a question between
Please.
that? Because I'm going to forget. When you're telling still somebody who's starting out, a novice, so in your practice, the first thing you focus is your body. And I know that a lot of meditation practices, like the guided meditation practices, so you can lay down, and relax. But one of the things that you just mentioned, which I wanted to kind of unpack a little bit, is the structural integrity for your meditation practice. So do you suggest a certain posture, a certain pose when you're getting ready to meditate? Like in TM, they tell you to sit up straight, like in a chair or something like that. So I was wondering, since you're talking about the body, what's the
Yeah.
preferred method?
Well, there's sitting practices, there's standing meditations, there's
Mhm.
movement practices, and they're all going to be adjusted depending on what practice you're doing. So I can't say that there's any one. However, that body regulation is not just when you're doing that ritual practice, it's in everything we do all day, every day. And
Right.
that's how we're living that meditation practice.
Got it.
And then the second regulation, which is regulating the breath, is a very deep topic. And in fact, Qigong is often referred to as the science of the breath because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies. And because of that, we broadly categorize them into yin methods and yang methods. Yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of meditations or breathing exercises. An example of a yin breath would be if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so if you want to integrate this style of inward energy expression in your meditation, we can do longer inhales, soft retentions at the end of the inhale, and shorter exhales to help bring that energy inward, which is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety, with panic attacks, with boosting your creativity. There's many reasons why we would do this yin side of the breath. Then we have the yang side of the breath, which is more aggressive. And an example of this would be if you ever had to push your car, or maybe you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is to exhale and put tension in the breath, maybe make it audible. And this helps generate energy and expand the energy outward. And so when we understand how to use basically the science behind the breath, we can use it to regulate our physical, mental, and emotional well-being throughout the day. Then
So
we have,
question, sorry
yeah, sure,
again, I
sure.
want to, so breath work, okay? I mean, I've been so many different classes. I studied different things. There's box breathing. Wim Hof has his breathing method. Then there's like the breath of fire. Those are things you're talking about in terms of, there's a different pattern. Box breathing, we can explain that. You inhale and you hold for 4 breaths, and then you exhale and you hold for 4 breaths, kind of thing, and you kind of go in a box. And the Wim Hof has you, breathing quicker and then holding your breath for long periods of time. And breath of fire. If I'm wrong, just correct me. By the way, at anything, it's more an aggressive way to breathe out. And then there is a meditation that I've been involved with that heavy breathing for longer periods of time. So which technique is it, like a personal method to the individual for what they need in that time, or is there, here's a general way that you need to breathe when you're meditating?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because you can't say one size fits all for every reason, right? You want to understand the science behind the breath so you can use it. So if you're having a panic attack, you don't want to do a lot of aggressive breathing. You want to do some more yin oriented breathing. If you want to get pumped up before a football game and you're an athlete and you're ready to go out, we don't want to be doing a lot of yin inward breathing and becoming feeling weak and simple, and it's kind of a simple example of breath too, is think about maybe a time when you were depressed or you cried. Your natural way that we breathe when we cry is longer inhales.
Hmm.
We're doing that and then we come
Yeah,
out. And
yeah.
this brings that energy inward. And when we do this, it's very yin. It makes the body cold. And oftentimes, when people are very depressed over periods of time, they get sick. And so the breathing affects our energetic state. And then another way to think about it on the yang side is think about a time maybe when you're laughing, ha 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 ha. You naturally exhale longer than you inhale. This makes the body get warm. Sometimes we laugh so hard our belly aches and we sweat. So understanding what the breath is doing is why you want to do the breath. And so when you start learning how to build an evolving life practice with the meditative arts, we take these breathing strategies and we integrate them to get different outcomes. And that's why I said it's so important to have a guide, because you could learn one of these methods that you mentioned. And if you don't understand what it's doing or why you're doing it, you might be using it for the wrong purpose. And so you can get distracted and lose a lot of time not understanding why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, such a wonderful example you brought up. Exactly that, because my daughter just had this stressful experience, but before getting on a flight, the flight was about to be canceled. It was heavy winds, and there was a lot of what you just said, like short breaths in, and then she started feeling cold, and she started, not having a panic attack per se, but that anxiety started building, and I was trying to let her breathe, but that's exactly it, like how do you breathe in that situation? So you're not taking those short breaths. So you understand exactly in a given situation, use this breath technique for the purpose that you want to achieve. Makes total sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the third pillar when cultivating a practice is regulating the mind. And we kind of already touched on that a little bit for like when you meditate, if you get distracted, we use our posture, our breath, our alignment to bring it back to center. There's this story that I really like about these two old monks, and they're walking down this dirt road after a huge rainstorm, and they come up to this big mud puddle. And on the other side of the puddle is this beautiful little girl standing there in a white dress, but she's crying. And the older monk, he yells across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." So the older monk, he rolls up his pant legs, he walks across the puddle, picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road, and finally the younger monk is just furious, and he says, we're not supposed to touch girls, but you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down and says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we have to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we realize we got to let that shit go? And so understanding how to recognize these imbalances and then have the tools and strategies to help bring us back to center is extremely important. And then the fourth regulation is regulating the energy. And this is an extremely deep topic and something that we could literally talk for hours about. But a basic idea of it is once you've reached a competent level in regulating the body, the breath, and the mind, you now have the tools to lead the energy in the body inward, outward, to circulate it on different patterns to get different outcomes. And then the final and fifth pillar is regulating the spirit. And this is a very profound idea as well. And this is something that meditation teachers and monks and spiritual leaders will spend their entire life's journey working towards that ultimate stage of enlightenment. But when you understand these five underlying principles, you can see that by integrating a meditation practice into your life, it can affect anything you do and make everything better.
Yeah, wonderfully said. What's your ultimate vision for the Yielding Warrior method? Like, what do you want to accomplish with your book, your practice, and you said amplify this to the world, but what will be your ultimate goal?
Right now, I'm really focusing on trying to help other people not only learn these arts and understand how to integrate them so they can reap the benefits themselves, but also to uh, people that are running martial arts academies or yoga studios or life coaches. I'm showing them how to hand down these arts and write prescriptions so they can help their people out and really help me spread the word because I can only do so much on my own. Right now, my next project is I'm writing a book called The Yielding Athlete, and I'm teaching people how to use these practices and just focus on athletic performance and mindset training. And so just having fun, doing what I'm passionate about. That's where
I
I'm
love
at.
it. Yeah, I mean, and training the trainer basically allows you to provide your methods to other people. They're going to train other people. So instead of you training one, you're training that one who's going to then train 30, etc. Maybe they'll pass on the method to other
Yeah.
people. Makes total sense. Um, I think you talked about listening to your body in terms of creating personal growth. So one of the things we just talked about it briefly, understanding what's going on with you and applying a technique specifically when you're listening to yourself. So how important, and it maybe it's part of the meditation practice or the arts, how important is it to be aware of what's going on in your body and making those adjustments if you have to make an adjustment to be able to use the right type of method for what's going on in the moment? Or is it just like you're just continuing to chisel away at that rock, doing the same thing every single day, regardless of what your body's, how your body's responding?
It's very important. Yes, there are things that we are chiseling away at. However, what makes somebody highly developed in the meditative arts is reaching a deeper level of feeling. And it doesn't matter if you're doing a sitting meditation, a Tai Chi form, a yoga practice, standing meditation, any meditative practice you do, the ultimate goal is to reach that deep level of feeling and awareness inside physically, mentally, and emotionally. So you can regulate these different energetic states and lead them where you want them to go, because it's much easier to make adjustments and lead things and change direction when you can control it. When it's already kind of out of control, it's a lot harder to bring that disturbance back to center. And so that feeling and that awareness is key in the practice.
Got it. Yeah, it makes total sense. So I have a few questions related to music that I ask all my guests. So uh, let's see if you remember. And if so, what was the very first concert that you ever attended?
Hmm. Don't know if it was the first one, but one of the first shows that I went and saw was Alice in Chains, and then in the late 80s, I believe it was.
That was my daughter's first concert. She wanted to go to see Justin Bieber, and I said, "You're gonna see a real. I'll take you, but you're gonna see a real concert first." So I saw Alice in Chains open up for. I took her to Alice in Chains opening for Jane's Addiction. So it was.
Oh, great. Nice.
What was the last concert you attended?
Uh, it's been a bit since last summer, I went to Avett Brothers.
Okay, got it. Another music question. For the next year, you can only listen to 5 albums. So you don't have to remember the name of the album. You can just say, Alice in Chains, like Jar of Flies. You can say Alice in Chains or whatever it is. What will be those 5 albums? And I know I'm capturing a moment in time, and I know it changes an hour after this, but let's capture that moment in time.
Let's see. Uh, Wood Brothers, Avett Brothers, um, um, it's kind of an old one, but I love his work. Jack Johnson. Um, Brent Cobb.
One more, I think.
Devil Makes Three.
There you go. Cool. All right. So, final question I have. Please describe what your room looked like growing up.
Mess. Uh, Man, it's hard to remember. I had one of those tall 6 shelf book things, or not book thing, but a dresser. Had a single bed, curtains, some posters on the wall. Um,
What posters do you remember?
I remember having a Def Leppard poster,
All right.
some Kiss posters when I was really young, uh, and then some sport posters. Um, Yeah, that's been a long time. It's hard to recall that one.
That's good, man. I can visualize that. So, Jeff, where can people engage with you? Where can people find the Yielding Warrior method? Where can people engage with your practice and anything else you want to share?
Yeah, so the yieldingwarrior.com. If you'd like to get a free copy of my book, right now I'm giving away a free copy. You just pay for shipping and handling. You can locate that at theyieldingwarrior.com/book. Also on that website, you have access to a 2-week trial for my online meditation program, and my teacher training programs are up there, and then all the social media handles at The Yielding Warrior.
And for my audience, I want to thank you so much for listening. I hope this was enlightening for you as it was for me. And I appreciate all the wonderful comments and reviews. I mean, they've been fantastic. I'm learning so much about improving and what I'm doing right as well. So I appreciate it. Thank you for buying my book, Making Cannabis Personal, on Amazon. And Jeff, I really want to thank you for this. It's been great, and I hope people really engage with it. I can't express more how important meditation and mindfulness and these practices are in the time that we are now, and also especially if you're an entrepreneur, if you're doing difficult things in your life, you have to find that balance. So, I really appreciate what you're doing. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching and listening. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, share this episode, and hit that bell. Like, comment, I so appreciate that. And check me out on social under Len May or Len May DNA. Find out more on LinkedIn or lenmaycoaching.com. And remember, everything is personal.